The spring game's finally here. Biggest questions, everything to know, right here, right now. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. So if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. I have a competitive side. I imagine Jared does as well, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends, download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. Jared Mack joining me here to take a look at Oregon's spring game, Autzen Audibles, 24/7 Sports. We'll also get to some baseball talk a little later because there's a big opportunity for the Ducks taking on top 10 Oregon State, and Jared is the number one go-to guy for Oregon baseball. But let's start with the spring game, Jared. What is your number one question that you want answered on Saturday afternoon?
Well, first, just want to thank you for having me on the podcast again. It was a great time last time. I'm looking forward to it again. Spring games are always kind of just fun to be around. I think the biggest question for me is I just want to see what the quarterback competition looks like. I think everybody's kind of set in stone that it's going to be Dillon Gabriel, and I think he will be the starter. But I didn't watch a lot of Oklahoma games last year, if I'm going to be honest. Like I've watched a lot of Dillon Gabriel, after he committed to Oregon and just his tape and stuff like that. But I just want to see what he looks like in person. I want to see the throws that he makes. I want to see his decision-making process. And again, it's a spring game. They're not playing at 100%. It's not going to be like full on, like there's going to be a real pass rush in his face and he's going to take a sack or something like that. But it will be a good first kind of impression because we haven't really been able to watch him in practice. We haven't seen him perform in any 11 on 11s more than one time, like 2 weeks ago, where he threw like 2 or 3 passes. So that's the biggest thing for me. I would say the other one is just how the interior defensive linemen look. I got a lot of question marks there. I think we talked about that on the last podcast. And just what the secondary rotation is. That's the other big question in my mind. It's like where are these guys lining up at safety? I think there's some question marks there, and just kind of if there is a hierarchy of what the cornerbacks look like as well.
Yeah, I think with the safety position, we'll get to see some young guys. At least I would hope, whether that's Tyler Turner, Cody DeCambra, Aaron Flowers, the true freshman. Because if you're we don't know the format of the spring game exactly. At least I don't know if you've been told, but I heard you guys the other day on the show that that hasn't been released. But if they do it the way they've done it in years past, which I hope they do, where they split up the ones and twos and they rotate quarterbacks, in and out, and there are 4 guys, Luke Moga and Austin Novosad, in addition to Gabriel and Moore, who should be able to see the field, and we'll kind of get our first look at from an outside standpoint. I think at the safety position, you can't go on to a 2-deep at 3 safety spots, a strong side, free safety, or whatever you want to call them, and then the nickel spot. You can't get there without freshmen, right? You can't put together a 2-deep. So I think you get to see some young guys there. But I love that you brought up the defensive line, because I think this has been a pretty consistent, talking point coming into the year of like, who steps up there? And Ben Roberts and Keon Ware-Hudson are kind of the incumbents of sorts, and you could expect them to start, but you've got close to 7-8 guys who are going to be vying for real playing time this year, who we'll all get our first look at in a game-like setting.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys who could be there, and they're all true freshmen or redshirt freshmen, which I think is really interesting compared to where they were last season, where you have guys like Popo Amavai, Taki Taimani, Brandon Dorless, Casey Rogers, all 5th or 6th year dudes, just a lot of really older guys. And now you have, Zadavian Sims is a true freshman. I could go through the list, but I don't want to bore your listeners here. You've got 7 or 8 guys who are either redshirt or true freshmen. So, and then you have Ben Roberts, who's technically a sophomore, but played 5 games in his freshman season, so they couldn't use a redshirt on him. Like, he's still a really young player. Really, it's just Jamari Caldwell and Keon Ware-Hudson as like the elder statesman on the interior, which is good. Like, that's a good combination of people to have. But I just think that there's some question marks of who's going to be behind them, because there's a lot of inexperience there. There's a lot of talent there. Don't get me wrong. I like a lot of the kids, but especially a defensive line, we saw last year how important it was to have experience. And I think it's going to be the same exact way, even going into the Big Ten.
Yeah, and you talk about the number of guys that could be there. I think it's anybody's guess as to whether is it Amari Washington, Mikael Gardner, Ashton Porter, Johnny Bowens, Terrence Green. Like, I don't know. You don't know.
Yeah.
No one's really got any idea right now. That's something I'm sure Tosh Lupoy and Tony Tuioti have been looking at throughout spring football. But I want to hop back to the quarterbacks for a moment because there is an agreement, consensus, whatever you want to call it. That yeah, Dillon Gabriel's a starter. I think he should be, but I'm really interested to see Dante Moore. I talked about him earlier this week on the show that I think he's one of the most fascinating players to watch because he needs a better situation than what he had at UCLA last year, which was kind of a rebuild year, and they didn't have all this certainty at quarterback, and Chip Kelly apparently had one foot out the door anyway. He's at Ohio State as the OC now. So I think Dante Moore, in what has been over a couple of seasons, demonstrated as a quarterback-friendly offense when it's called by Will Stein, going back to his time with UTSA. I want to see what that looks like and how the game feels to him in this new look offense.
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of what we did as fans last year, looking at like the Oregon spring game. It's like, hey, Ty Thompson is set to be the next in line, right? I want to watch him. I want to see how he does. I want to see how he reads a defense, what his deep ball is like. And it's kind of similar in this circumstance as well, because Dante Moore is, he's going to be in a competition with Autzen Audibles for sure, but a lot of people have anointed him like the next guy. As soon as Dillon Gabriel leaves in his final year of eligibility, like they have Dante Moore as the next starting quarterback. So I think that's certainly a good or like a really important person to keep an eye on, because you do kind of want to see what he's going to look like, because he didn't look great at times at UCLA. And there's a lot of reasons that go into that. A, he's a true freshman. B, the scheme. C, the competition and just the playmakers who are around him. There are a lot of problems there, but you're hoping if you put him into the right circumstance with Will Stein and just the playmakers that are around him, he's going to look good. And I anticipate him to look pretty good at a spring game. And a lot of quarterbacks look really good at a spring game. But you got to look at what he does when reading a defense, his ball placement, the tempo that he has, like his ability to like fit balls in tight windows, things like that. So I've heard good things about him. I've heard, as a recruit, heard great things about him. Like I think he's going to look like a stud out there, and so could Autzen Audibles. I'm not sure, but that's why quarterbacks are going to be a really fun thing to watch.
Yeah, and we should see all four of them. Luke Moga is a true freshman. Mm-hmm. I don't really have high expectations for him going into this game, but Novosad's a guy who, just kind of came in late in spot duty in that Fiesta Bowl because Ty Thompson had transferred out, and, it was an incredibly small sample size, but I mean, he looked better than he did in the spring game. Or at least he looked a little bit bigger, and he's going into year two. And like that's a guy who I could see transferring out after the spring game if he feels like he's not going to have a path for 2025, but maybe he doesn't. So I'm definitely watching the quarterbacks, but there are plenty of other positions as well. And Jared and I are going to get to those and a little Oregon NFL draft talk here on this Friday. First, let's get to our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, everything you want and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. I want your thoughts on this matchup, Jared, because I think Oregon secondary, as you mentioned, is something to watch because there's so many new faces and Jalil Florence isn't going to play. So, the number 2 corner slot, if Florence is out, that's, up for grabs. I think once Florence is healthy, he is the number 2 corner in the secondary, but they're going to get tested against one of the best receiving cores in all of college football. Like, I think Oregon had a great receiving core last year, might be even better this season. Like Evan Stewart to Troy Franklin, do you have that much of a drop off there? Probably not a ton, at least when you're looking at NFL draft upside. I think that's the most intriguing positional matchup, DBs against this receiving core.
Certainly. And I think Oregon got a kind of a taste of that against Washington last year for those two games. Like, again, I'm not saying that Oregon's going to put 3 NFL receivers out there next draft, but those were really talented dudes. And Oregon secondary, that was great all year. It led the Pac-12 in pass defense as a whole, even with those games included. They ran into a lot of trouble there, and they just went out and reloaded. And yeah, Jaleel Florence is hurt. That's fine. He should be ready by fall camp. And like you said, I expect him to be the cornerback number 2 when the actual season rolls around. But they add Jabbar Muhammad. They add Cam Alexander out of UTSA. They retain Dante Manning. They still have Roderick Pleasant. They still have other guys like Solomon Davis. They bring in guys like Dakota Fields, Ifeoma Badegwu, and I'm forgetting one more. Another talent, Sione Laulea, another talented freshman, or he was a JUCO kid, but still, it's an incredibly talented room, and it needs to be, because that's going to be a game changer in the Big Ten if they can hold any passing offenses to absolutely nothing. That's a game changer for any defense in any conference, but specifically the Big Ten, where teams are really physical. There's going to be a ground game. Everybody's going to have it. It just depends how well can you defend the pass, and that's what Michigan has done really well the last 2 seasons, as well as being a good front seven who stopped the run. But it's certainly an interesting matchup because of just the talent level that Oregon has assembled on both sides of the ball. I mean, I went through all the guys that came into the cornerback room who are highly touted recruits, and Oregon has 3 or 4 of them on the offensive side and wide receivers who came in this last class too. Just really talented, and then just getting able to see Dillon, Gabriel, and Dante Moore throwing the ball. Like, that's another matchup where it's just a lot of talent on this spring game, and it's going to be fun to watch all the true freshmen and those guys play, because again, it's kind of, it goes back to my Dante Moore point. Like, these are the guys who are theoretically in line for the next couple of seasons of where they're going to be.
I think you and I both just habitually cracked a smile when you said Dillon Gabriel throw the football, because there's going to be like a semi-real football game. Like, we've been talking about all this sort of stuff for so long, and this is the first and last impression we'll really have of this team until the season opener on August 31st in Eugene,
like
in Eugene against Idaho. Yeah, it is 31st because Southern Utah plays on the 29th. But I think that for this Oregon offense, expectations are really, really high. The receivers are a part of that. I think the running backs, we know what the running backs are. Like, we've seen Jordan James, we've seen Noah Whittington, and the expectation is he'll be able to eventually get back healthy. I think Jay Harris is interesting because when we say that we haven't really seen much of Jay Harris, no one has seen much of Jay Harris. Like, what he looks like at practice. You guys see him out there, but no one's really seen him in a game setting. So I think in the running back room, that's the guy that I'm most looking at, because I don't know if Whittington even needs to play. Like, he's so proven in college football at this point. I don't know if there's anything to be gained. Jordan James in a new offense, like, maybe, get him a few reps here and there. But we know what Jordan James is as a running back. But the mystery in that room, we even, kind of know what Jane Lamar looks like. The mystery in that room is Jay Harris. I don't think anybody has got any clue really what to expect, other than, well, he's a big physical guy.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. I'm really excited to see Jay Harris. I talked to him on the phone when he, like a couple weeks after he first committed to Oregon. Seems like a great dude. We interviewed him the other day. Again, reiterated the point that he's a great dude, and he's huge. He's by far the biggest running back on the team. It's kind of impressive. He's a good, solid, like 6'2". Like, when we talk to each other, we're eye to eye, and that's not like Oregon hasn't had that the last couple of years. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. All right, carry on.
Yeah, and Oregon hasn't had a big running back. Like, they just, like, Bucky, like, they've had big stature guys. Like, Jordan James is a big dude. Noah Whittington's a big dude. Like, I would not want to go in like an A gap and find them there, because they would, bowl a lot of people over. But, Jay Harris looks like he's like Najee Harris, just a huge kid who can just run downhill and kind of look like a middle linebacker out there going between the A and the B gap. So I'm excited to watch him play. I think the running back position is pretty stacked. Again, same with Jaden Lamar. Seems like he's grown a lot. Heard like some really nice things from Will Stein and Dan Lanning about him recently. But that running back room, like you said, it's pretty set in stone. There's not There's not a lot of things that are real question marks there, and that's not a bad thing, to be clear.
No, it definitely is not. By the way, forgive me. Height bewilders me as someone who is definitely not 6'2".
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm on the. Once upon a time, my X handle was Smalls_55. But as my friend told me when my other show switched to Locked On College Football, I quote unquote went corporate on them and such. But so that's the way of the world. But anyway, so I think in the running back room, the only thing that I'd want to see is like, hey, if Whittington or James goes down with an injury, is Oregon okay? And that's what I looked for was Jaden Lamar, who we've seen a little bit. I think he's looked solid. Or could Jay Harris be that guy? Could Jay Harris be a goal line or a short yardage sort of back? Is he that sort of runner? Or, what does he bring to the table? So I'm definitely going to be watching the running backs as well. But that's really the only question, because the top two guys, like we said, are just absolute studs. I want to talk a little NFL draft here. I got a couple questions from some of you out there, and you can always submit mailbag questions, YouTube, X, subtext, however you want to get a mailbag question in there. And the questions are about the NFL draft and kind of what to expect. So we're recording this show just a few hours before the first round of the NFL draft, where I expect at least one Duck will be selected, but probably no more than two. And I think that between Troy Franklin, JPJ, and Bo Nix, you can make the case for any of them to fall out of the first round. You can make the case for any of them to be in the first round, which is why I think one or two is probably the number, but not zero and not all three either. But after those headline guys, Jared, with this Oregon draft class, what are you expecting as they go to the pros?
Well, I think that I think they're going to set a new record in Oregon history of total overall draftees, which would be 7, aka everybody who went to the NFL Combine. So that's the 3 guys you mentioned, and that's also Bucky Irving, Kyrie Jackson, Brandon Dorlus, and Evan Williams. I'm forgetting one more.
Casey Rogers.
Well, Casey didn't go to the Combine, but
right.
he could also be a draftee. Jamal Hill's another guy who could be a draftee. Those are kind of the, last year it was surprising when, Alex Forsyth got drafted in the 7th round. Jordan Riley got drafted in the 7th round. So there's always a surprise or two in the draft. But I think that's what people are going to remember the most for now until all their careers really get going. Is that they broke the record. And that record originally, fun fact, was set in 1940 when they had 19 rounds in the NFL draft.
No. 1940?
1940. You can look it up.
A year after Oregon's men's basketball national championship, for those interested.
That's right. The Tall Furs.
That's
right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
And they changed it to 7 rounds in 1993, and then the 2002 class with Joey Harrington that also had 6 draftees. So modern era, it's 2002, but people in 1940, if they were alive and were paying attention to the NFL, they remember the Oregon Ducks had.
You'd be surprised at the demographic range of the audience here at Locked On Ducks, Jared. I wouldn't be surprised if there were a couple guys who were maybe at least alive for that 1940 NFL draft. You and I were not even remotely close to being around for it. But so the record is 6, and they could set it. The record is 6, and they could set it with 7.
Yeah, and I think that they will. Again, I think everybody who went to the Combine is going to be drafted. I think Evan Williams is probably a 6th or 7th round pick. I think Bucky Irving is anywhere from 4 to 6. And then I think everybody else in the list could be a top 4 round draft pick. But the first rounders, like you mentioned, I think it's really just Bo, JPJ, and Troy Franklin. And I don't anticipate all 3. I could see 0, to be honest with you. You just don't know what's going to happen here.
I'd pick 0 before 3, but I like I said, I think one is probably the most likely. If you were to go over to our friends at FanDuel and they were to set betting odds, how many Ducks are taken in the first round? 1 is probably minus 200. 2 is probably plus 150. 0 is probably plus 150. And 3 is probably plus 500.
Yeah. I just think it depends what NFL front offices want to do, because I've made this point at least a dozen times when talking about this. But if you draft somebody in the first round, you get a 5th-year player option. That's really valuable when it's a quarterback. So if a team is all in on a quarterback to get a fifth-year player option is incredibly important, because then that postpones how much you have to pay them and how much time you have to set the team up around them if they are good enough. So if a team like the Minnesota Vikings, like
Denver
Seattle
Broncos,
Seahawks, like the Denver Broncos, if they are sold on our dear friend Bo Nix, then I would be very shocked to see them not take him in the first round, but elect to take him in the second round. I know that would give them a chance to maybe get a better prospect, maybe fill another position of need in the first round. But if Bo Nix is good in the NFL, which you would imagine they would think so if they're taking him with a first or second round pick, you would probably want that fifth-year player option. So I think that's the only way that where Oregon is a surefire, at least one person in the first round. And JPJ has kind of fluctuated between first and second round.
Yeah, I feel like he really flew up draft boards and then kind of cooled back off. Because I see mock drafts that have got interior offensive linemen being taken in the first round that are not him, which is curious because he just won the award for the best center in all of college football. I don't know what else you need to do on the interior, and he can play guard. So yeah, I mean, he'd be my first interior offensive lineman off the board. Far be it from me to have graded every single offensive lineman the way the NFL draft scouting community has, and I am the most unbiased person when it comes to Jackson Powers Johnson. That is just clearly well established. I mean, you look at this show on YouTube and you could see that that's the case. So it would be a crime to bring Jared on the show and not talk about the biggest series of the year for Oregon baseball. So we'll do that next. After we talk about Monopoly Go. I am a competitive person, have been my whole life. I've got an older brother. That's just the way that it works. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, and it's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations. You build up amazing cities, and they bring you the big money. But the best part is messing with your friends. You can charge them rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly, but you can also heist their vaults of riches for yourself. And the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon really is. But if you're not into the competitive side of it, you can team up with your friends as well and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Let's talk some good old-fashioned baseball, Jared, because Oregon is having, by all accounts, a good year. Has not been perfect all the time, but they're inside the top 25 going into the series, which starts on Friday against Oregon State. And look, Stanford was probably the biggest test to date. They lost 2-3 down in the Bay Area. I don't know if they call their baseball field the Farm like they do the football stadium. I feel like there's another name for it.
They call it the Sunken Diamond.
Sunken Diamond, that's the one. Yeah, the Sunken Diamond. I don't know what goes into that. But anyway, Oregon State is up next. And obviously this is a big rivalry game. The series will be it's actually the first of 4 straight games against the Beavs because they're going to play a game on Tuesday as well, which is a weird scheduling thing to do. Typically a Tuesday game is, a non-conference against a WCC has been the most common thing for Oregon to do. But you play 4 straight against top 10 team. If Oregon... Certainly you want to avoid getting swept, but if they go 2-2 here, I'd feel pretty good about that.
I think you should. I think that this is a really good Oregon State team, just like it normally is. The last couple of seasons, Oregon State has certainly had Oregon's number, and the Stanford series was unfortunate. If you're Oregon, it's just a bad pitching display. They really haven't had one of those on a weekend series specifically in a while. Probably you go back to like late February, early March against UCSB. That was the last time where they really had a poor weekend series, but it happens. But the nice thing was that the offenses seemed to be like firing on all cylinders. They put up over 10 runs against Gonzaga in the midweek. They hit 10 total home runs. I know that they lost 19-7 in the first game, but they still put up 7 runs. They put up 17 runs the next day. They put up another 7 runs on Sunday. These are positive signs. And then they threw up 7 runs against San Francisco on a Monday, which is another weird midweek game on a Monday. But Oregon State, their one struggle this year has been their pitching staff. And that pitching staff struggled against Cal, where Oregon State was swept for the first time this year. But you always have to watch out for their bats. I mean, This Oregon State offense is just incredible. It's a joy to watch. I'm very excited to go there and just watch potentially Oregon State hitters just mash some baseballs because, guys like Travis Bazzana,
Bazzana is, for those who don't know, Bazzana had a streak earlier this year in which he hit a leadoff home run in, what was it, 6 consecutive games?
6 or 7, either or is ridiculous.
Not 6 or 7 straight games with a home run. 6 or 7 straight games where he comes up for his first at bat and just goes deep. And he's the leadoff hitter. I would throw him 3 straight curveballs in the dirt and say, I dare you to swing. If I am anyone of Grayson Grinsell or RJ Gordon or Kevin Sider, those are Oregon's projected starters for the weekend as usual. And they've had their ups and downs. I think they've done a nice job, though, as you talked about the last time you were on the show and we were talking baseball. I think they've been better than last year. I don't think they've hit their ceiling yet, but I think they've done a good job delivering a lot of quality starts. There was a complete game 2-run performance from, I think it might have been Sider the other day.
Ian Umlaut.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, one of your midweek starters against San Francisco there. Those sorts of games just haven't happened a lot. And I think the bullpen has been really, really solid with Logan Mercado on the back end, who's up for a midseason reliever award at this point in college baseball. So I like what I've seen there. That they've got to be careful with Bazzana, but the rest of that Oregon State lineup as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's easy to go and look at the Stanford weekend and say that the pitching staff just hasn't improved, and this is just like how it was last year. Yeah, but that was every weekend last year. A lot of people did not. I don't want to toot my own horn here. Not a lot of people watched as many baseball games as I have of Oregon baseball over the last 2 seasons. So I'm very well aware that the pitching staff was A, bad this weekend, and B, bad last season. But this year, it's just been night and day. RJ Gordon went on a run before his Stanford start of 4 straight games with 2 or fewer earned runs and at least 5 2/3 or 6 innings pitched. That didn't happen last year. Nobody did that. And Grayson Grinsell is just going out there and he's like, all right, I'll throw 6 innings and 4 runs. That's good compared to a lot of other teams.
It's solid.
It's barely solid. College baseball is really hard to be a really good pitcher. And even Kevin Sider as the Sunday guy, he's been good enough. He's had high moments, he's had low moments, but he's just going to go out there and compete every single time and pitch old. And if he's on one day, he can really shut down a lineup. And that's what Oregon is going to be hoping for this entire weekend, is that their starting guys are on. They can go deep enough, 5, 6, 7 innings into games and turn it over to the bullpen, like you mentioned, where they can give it to Bradley Mullen, Brock Moore, Logan Mercado, Michael Friend, hopefully have someone like Jackson Jordan back and running up this weekend. There's guys back there. There's opportunities, there's options, and there's just a lot of talent compared to where it was last season.
Yeah, I like where they're at. By the way, did you see Jacob Walsh's slash line from last week?
Yes.
That's one of the most disgusting things I have ever seen in the history of sports. That you can do over a multiple game stretch. I'll pull it up real quick for those who might not have seen it. But Walsh, let's just say he's swinging a hot bat. Let me see. Here we go.
When he's on, he can carry a team.
His slash line was 706, 750, and 1647. So for those who are unaware of what exactly that entails, that's a batting average of 706 and a on-base plus slugging percentage of 1.647. And about 1,000 is a great OPS. And to have a 1647, I think that you could very well look back at this series with Oregon State or the 4-game stretch and say the team that won 3 or all 4 of the games, or this game might have been decided on which star bat shows up the most. Because when Bazzana or Walsh are in the zone, college arms are just not good enough to get these guys out.
Yeah, and that's the difference between Oregon's pitching staff last year and this year. They can get some of those guys out where they just couldn't last year. I'm not saying they're going to get out of Travis Bazzana. I am more than ready for him to not get out a single time over the 4-game stretch that they play. But like you said at the beginning, I wouldn't throw him a strike. It's like,
No,
you can take your
I
base.
wouldn't.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna let somebody else do the damage, and there are plenty of dudes on that team who could do some damage. To be clear, but he's number one. He's number
Yeah.
one, head and shoulders over everybody else. And I'm not sure what Oregon's going to do with him. I asked Mark Wazkowski about that. He said, "Well, nobody's figured out how to get him out this year, so we're going to
Just
try our
walking.
best." It's like, all right,
The Barry Bonds approach, or I don't know if you follow college softball at all, but Jocelyn Allo, when she was slugging at Oklahoma, was
yeah, I
literally,
remember her.
yeah, mathematically, it was a smart decision to walk her every time she stepped up to the plate because she had a better than 50% chance to either hit a double or a home run, which is insane. But that's just
Incredible.
where some bats are at, and those two guys been seeing the ball really well. Last thing for you here, Jared, and then we'll wrap up today's show. Bryce Betcher, is there a better defensive center fielder in baseball? Because I haven't seen one.
He's damn good. I think it's really incredible that Oregon went from Colby Shade last year, who was no slouch of his own in center field, to Bryce Betcher now. He makes a highlight reel play basically every game. If the ball is hit to center, and you feel pretty good about it being caught, unless it's like a no doubt home run. But yeah, he's great to watch. It's really fun. I have no idea how he covers that much ground at like 215, 220 pounds. It's thoroughly impressive, and he's just one of the best humans I know too. So great kid, great center fielder, and no, I haven't seen a better center fielder in baseball yet this year.
And he's been slugging too. You know, last year I think he didn't have as big of a role, but he's been hitting the ball very well. Of course, Jeffrey Hurd's been hitting this year for the Ducks too. Like they've just got a lot of hitters really up and down the lineup. And I believe Saturday's game against Oregon State is going to be on ESPN2, if memory serves, which will be awesome because it'll be the last hurrah in the Pac-12 for Oregon and Oregon State baseball, and they're both going to be in the top 25. The Bees are inside the top 10. I think they're number 9 right now, and Oregon, depending on which poll you look at, I think is sitting at about 22nd. So should be an awesome series. I'm envious of you, Jared, that you get to cover it, but we appreciate you coming by here on the show today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I always appreciate you, inviting me on, and I love coming on. So happy to do it whenever you need.
Awesome. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Enjoy the spring game. Have a great weekend. And until next time, have a wonderful rest of your day. And go Ducks.